All right, guys, I'm here with Mike Blair. We all know who Mike Blair is, the man, the myth, the legend. And we're going to talk about that NAR settlement, right? I have a lot to talk about. I don't know how much time you have, but we're here to talk and role play and figure out ways, ins and outs of rebuttals and things that pop up. But let's just rewind, right? What is the NAR settlement? Why did it happen? And what's next, starting tomorrow, basically, or in 2 days, August 17th?
I mean, I don't really know why it happened, and yet everything that's happening in the settlement is still going to take place, just in a little bit of a different way. And so essentially it's to control the display of commissions to a buyer's side, because there was a lot of complaints, and I guess the settlement is essentially because sellers didn't know that they were actually compensating the listing agent to sell their property and also the buyer's agent.
But it's in the listing agreement.
It is.
It was. At
so
least.
Yeah, it always has been.
And it's still in there.
So the buyer's agent's commission is no longer in the listing agreement. So there's no spot even to have a conversation around paying the buyer's side from the seller.
But you do want to notify your seller that, hey, this is the potential of what's to come, right? Someone's going to submit an offer with a commission agreement, right?
Yeah. So it's important to let the sellers know, in this case, that there is a potential, that a high likelihood even at that the buyer's agent is going to submit a request for compensation.
Yeah, so I think that's going to throw a curveball for sellers. No one really talks about the listing side of it and the buyers. We signed a listing just yesterday, and we signed it for 3%. We told the guy, hey, there might be another 2.5%, 3% coming your way from the buyer's side if we fail to identify a buyer for you on our own accord, right? And that's when it kind of was like, well, I can go to find someone else cheaper and this and that. So I want to role play with you. We talked about the buyers and the sellers. Let's role play with the buyer conversation first, and then jump into the sellers, because that's going to throw people around. I personally don't know why this happened either. And my number one question is, why don't people just not quit NAR? Before we talk about everything else, why don't they just drop out of NAR? Like, what benefit does NAR have over us as real estate agents?
Yeah, I guess, people could, right? At this point, they could kind of separate themselves or not participate in the National Association of Realtors. And that could be beneficial in some ways and could be detrimental in other ways, right?
Why
NAR
detrimental?
Kind of helps provide the documentation, the contracts, all the legalities.
So all those contracts are from NAR?
Correct.
Can you not buy them on your own? Like, you can't just pay a one-time fee or something? I've looked into it. I've never got a clear-cut answer.
I think eventually it might be possible, and yet there might be modifications, or you may not be able to copy all the verbiage or things like that are in those other documents, because not only are they from NAR, but then they come down statewide, right? And so there are different documents in different states and different regulations, rules, policies, things like that. And so once those are all kind of modified, if I or you were to separate from NAR and we created our own, we bought our own, and there was an adjustment or a tweak, right? Because as you know, the contracts, they're always making adjustments, adding things, taking things out. And so if we weren't prepared to make those adjustments at those times, you might open yourself up for a different lawsuit, right? There are
But I wonder
pros
what
and
happens
cons.
if, like, say I get my own contract and I submit an offer on your listing where you're not familiar with my buyer's contract. What are you going to say? You could say, no, I want a car form. And I'm going to say, I don't have a car form. You still want my offer type thing? Is that what happens? I kind of compare it to, like, CrossFit. Like, I do CrossFit sometimes, as you can tell. But CrossFit, you have to pay an affiliation fee to be a CrossFit affiliate. And that's kind of NAR, right? You're paying a fee. We pay a fee to NAR. I don't know what the price is, like $300 a year or something. But there's over 10 million agents out there. Like, NAR's making money.
For sure.
And so is CrossFit. You have to pay $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, whatever that is per year to just say you're a CrossFit affiliate gym. But I asked these CrossFit owners, like, what do they get? Well, they're associated with the CrossFit, like the games, the athletes, the recognition of it. And then I go, why don't you just quit? They go, some people do. Some people finally go, I don't need the branding. It's actually limiting to what I can do based on the corporate level. I have the base. I have the support. They didn't help me grow it. Maybe they did with the name CrossFit, right? The branding. But I just compare that to NAR, where it's like NAR didn't really, like, I could quit tomorrow. But it comes down to the contracts, right? And so that's one thing I have to look into. But I plan on quitting NAR for good.
Nice.
But I got to get the contracts in line. I just need more of you guys to quit too, because I just see what's coming. I'm going to submit an offer, and the agent's going to be
like, whoa. Like,
I've never seen this contract.
Yeah.
But I think big agencies have their own contract. I think Redfin had their own purchase agreement at one point. Compass, I heard, was creating their own to get around all this. So there's companies that are doing it, big heavy hitter companies with fees and lawyers.
I think that there is going to be a possibility that that's going to take place more and more.
Yeah.
And so I think that the caution on, let's say I was still part of NAR and you weren't, and I received your offer, the caution is that those offers and the documents, there's so much in those that how do I know and trust without bringing in an attorney to review it and understand it and digest it? How do I know that there's not some verbiage or language slipped in there that says something that could hurt not only me, but maybe the seller that I'm representing? Yeah.
So long story short, I'm going to quit. We'll talk about more in depth later. But let's role play basically a buyer and a buyer's agent. I'll be the buyer, you be the agent.
Okay.
This is basically the first phone call. So it's ring, 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 ring.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, hey, Mike, what's going on? My name's Josh. My buddy James sent me your way. You closed the deal for him 4 years ago, and he told me you're a really good agent, so I need to find a house.
Oh, awesome. James is a great guy. How did you meet James, or how are you connected to him?
High school, yeah. We were friends, best friends in high school, and we've stayed in touch. And he just bought a house, like I said, 4 years ago, and he loves it, and he had a good experience with you, yeah.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And so typically our next step is to understand a little bit more about what you're looking for in a home and get an idea of your timeline and kind of what your next steps might be.
Yeah.
So pause. So my initial goal is to schedule a buyer's consultation with this individual, with the new buyer, and to understand their
So that's 100% your goal on the first call.
Correct.
Why don't
Not
you
necessarily
just...
on the first call,
Yeah.
and yet, like in this call, if it was just a random call, we'd have a conversation. Oh, like what caught your interest about wanting to buy a home in the first place, and who's going to be living in that home? Why is that important? How close is that to your job? If you give me a location,
I was gonna
there's
say,
some
why not
preliminary
have-
information.
Yeah, why not have that consult there?
Yeah.
Versus scheduling it. Maybe he's not a decision maker, or like you just.
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons. So one, my job in that first call is to try to identify a couple things, some motivations, some timelines, and then just get to know that person a little bit, build a little bit of trust, a little bit of rapport, and yet not go too deep into the conversation at that moment.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of reasons for that. If I go into the buyer's consultation in that moment, then it's kind of just a straight sales process.
Yep.
And that could work in some cases.
I think it's worked.
Yeah.
For everyone, right?
And yet,
for most people.
For most people, if that's their approach, and yet I have a systematic approach to be able to work a client all the way through to create a full experience for that person. And so I don't want to shortchange them by not going through my normal diligent process, because not only does that help me become a better agent to that person, it also helps them understand the full process and set expectations of what's going to happen next and what potential challenges there might be. And I want to cover all those things in a full consultation so that there's full understanding, and I can always go back when we're in escrow, when we're looking at houses. Hey, remember when we talked about that in the consultation? This is why we do it this way, right?
Yeah. That makes sense. So you're trying to get the basics done on the first initial phone call, and then you're going to schedule a actual buyer's consultation.
Yeah.
And is that face to face or?
Yeah, as much as I can, I would like to do that face to face. Again, when you meet face to face, there's body language involved. There's eye contact. There's building rapport, being able to like understand that other person a little bit better, versus on the phone, versus on Zoom.
Okay.
So face-to-face first, if I can, if they're local. Second option is on Zoom, and then third option is a phone call. And yet I almost never do a phone call consultation.
Wow, that's impressive. Okay, so let's go back to the phone call we left off on. You were trying to get me more information out of me. So
yeah.
All right. What's my name? Josh.
So Josh, how long have you been looking for a home?
Oh, it's been about 6 months. Not really looking, just on Redfin, Zillow, the basics. Yeah.
So you've already kind of started thinking about what your ideal home would look like.
Yep.
Awesome. And then if you were in like a perfect scenario and it was a perfect world, when would you want to be in that new home buy?
My lease is up at the end of the month, so I'll go month to month at that point. I would like to find something hopefully in the next couple weeks.
Okay.
But I don't mind taking our time until the right house pops up. But
gotcha.
I can send you a whole bunch of homes now, and we can, on Redfin,
Cool.
And then we'll go that route, and then maybe you could start showing me some homes.
Okay, sounds good. Well, you mentioned Redfin, so I'm assuming that's the main platform that you're using, right?
Redfin and Zillow
Okay.
right now. Yeah. I saw a Homes.com commercial on the Super Bowl using that, but that's not,
Okay, yeah. So our goal would be to narrow down a couple things. That way we can streamline the process and just make communication a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So cool. Let's do that. And so typically, Josh, since it sounds like you need to jump into a house sooner than later, and that's the desire and that's the goal, sounds like the next best step for us is to get together, and that way I can go really in depth into understanding what you're looking for in a home. I can actually educate you on the home buying process, and then you can learn a little bit more about our system and our process to be able to have a great experience for your home buying process.
Okay.
And so, Josh, what typically works best for you, mornings or evenings?
I'm usually flexible. It doesn't matter. Whatever's easiest for you.
Okay.
Is there a way to meet this weekend, maybe at a property, or what? What do you?
Yeah, we could definitely do that. And yet, I recommend coming to the office, and that way you get the full experience, like most of my clients ultimately tend to enjoy. And so, we can definitely meet this weekend, and then if we're all ready to rock and roll, we can definitely line up some properties to go to afterwards, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that actually works better. Probably.
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome. Does morning or afternoons work better for you?
Morning. It sounds like we're gonna have a full day.
Let's do it. Yeah. So how about Saturday at 10 a.m.?
Saturday at 10 a.m. works.
Perfect.
Okay.
And so then what I'll do next is, in that process, I've already potentially gathered their phone number and email address. And so I'll let them know, hey, Josh, I'm going to send you an email. It'll have a calendar invite. And in that calendar invite, it'll have the address to my office so that we can meet at the office. Again, go over everything that you're looking to find in a home. And then by any chance, is there any other decision makers that would need to come to be able to help you make a decision on buying a
my
house?
wife will be there.
Okay.
Maybe her parents.
Perfect.
Should they be there the first visit, or?
Sounds good. Yeah, I would encourage all of them to come, and that way they understand and you understand, number one, the home buying process, and everybody's on the same page. But number two, it's a good opportunity for us to really address exactly what you and your wife and maybe your wife's parents or your parents are looking for, because what I've found is that there's often sometimes a little bit of a disconnect, right? You might want the 3-car garage, and she might not even care about that, and she might have a different priority. And so in our meeting, there's an opportunity for us to understand what you're looking for, but also narrow down maybe your top 4 or 5 things that are absolutes in your home. And that way we only focus on those types of homes. And so I'm excited to see you on Saturday. Look out for the calendar invite.
Okay. Well, one last question. I've been reading this thing about like commissions and stuff. Like, I don't know what's happening. This is obviously my first time buying a house.
Yeah, no worries.
But my friend said that he didn't have to pay anything. So am I on the hook for something? Is this like a commission-free environment, or what? How does this work now?
Yeah, it's definitely a great question, and we actually go into depth in that on Saturday when we meet, and that way I answer all of those questions and make sure to address any concerns or anything like that as well. And so I'll definitely go over that, and I'll make sure to make a point to go over that in depth.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Awesome.
All right, see you then.
Perfect.
So I would have, I'm not as patient as he is, obviously. And I know a lot of agents who aren't, right? I see it every single day. You probably see it every day.
Yeah.
One, I would have rushed through the call. I would have made that the consultation, right? Like, let's talk about your goals now.
Yeah.
I have you on the phone. Might as well strike while the iron's hot type of thing. I would have talked about commission then. More mistake. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's what agents do typically. And it sounds like we can't do that anymore. It shouldn't be done that rushed, because it's a big ticket item. If we're asking a buyer to pay a 3% commission, that's in San Diego. That's $30,000.
Yeah,
off $1 million home.
It's a lot. Yeah, it could be a lot. And I think in your approach, in what you've mentioned, that does work and can work sometimes. And yet, I'd rather focus on adding as much value to the client up front, creating as many good opportunities to work together long term, right? Like my fallout after I meet a client in a buyer's consultation is almost zero, right? Because it gives me an opportunity to learn more about them, like meet their family, meet the wife, get them on the same page, because they're usually not, right? So I'm almost like the mediator also, and I'll obviously educate them on the process. But in that education portion, I become the trusted expert. I become somebody that they lean on, that they trust, and they want to continue to move forward with. And so I have to build that in the beginning. Otherwise, if you go your approach, again, it does work sometimes. They find the perfect house, they buy it, they close, they're done. But most of the time, that doesn't work that smoothly. Usually there's hiccups along the way, and I actually address those up front so that when they do come up, they've already been educated on that. We already actually have a understanding of how to handle that. And so my fallout people don't quit or leave or like, I'm going to go hire Joe Schmo and forget working with you. Like that almost never happens to me because I'm so proactive up front.
And it probably helps with retention of clients down the line. Referrals, I'm guessing,
of course.
always come back to you.
Yeah.
I would, the days were easy where you just pick up the phone and you have a cousin or a family member or referral who's like, hey, Josh, I want to see some houses. It's usually by text, right? Hey, here's a Redfin link. Can I go see it? I have clients now who are family and friends who the conversation is shifting to, look, we can't see this until you understand that you're, like, that's an awkward conversation. And I want to have, like, a back and forth right now of, like, just, like, how do you handle a family situation? I think we touched on it briefly, but if my cousin sends me a house and he wants to go see it, how do I handle that? Like, that's not an easy, am I just not going to get paid? Because you can't say, hey, cousin, you're paying me a 3% commission. Like, I know it's negotiable, but that's going to mess up some families, I think.
Potentially. So
what do you do there?
And so in those scenarios, right, like let's play out that scenario. So let's pretend you're my cousin, right? So my cousin Josh reaches out and Josh is like, hey, Mike, I want to buy a house, 123 Main Street. Can we go look at the house today? I would say something like, that's awesome, Josh. Like, how long have you been looking for a house? And then you would share with me maybe a little bit more. I'd try to extract a little bit of information.
Even if I'm your cousin, there's no like, bro, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, you go. You're still in Mike Blair mode.
I got to process.
You're back in okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, so I would go back to that process. But, if there was some, a little bit more aggressive conversation around, okay, well, like, I want to go see it right now, then I would lean into the settlement, right? Lead into what's going on in the market and what the requirements are. And, Josh, like, man, I would love to just drop everything and show you that house. And I'd love to help you buy the house today. And yet, unfortunately, because of these crazy lawsuits, they put some rules in place to where you actually have to sign a buyer's agreement before we even go look at a house. And the reason for that is to protect the agents, protect the seller, and protect you as the buyer so that there's no kind of miscommunication or no shadiness or anything like that. And so that is the process. And so I can definitely send you that document right now to sign. You will be signing based on the commissions. And typically that's why we need to meet so I can go over all those things because there's a lot of questions around that and a lot of maybe things that people are unsure about. And so I want to make sure that you understand all that before you even sign to work with me because I might not even be the best fit to work with you based on that. And so why don't we do this? Why don't we jump into a Zoom right now and I'll go over those things. And if it still makes sense for you to move forward, sign the document, then we can go look at the house today. How does that sound?
I'm at your house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
I'm having a beer.
Come over.
We're having, maybe we're not having a beer, but we're having it's a kid's birthday party. You're at my house. I'm like, Mike, the next door neighbor put his house for sale. Can we go check it out real quick? You're going to give me that same pitch. You're going to say, nah, I can't, bro. Is someone going to snitch on you? Or like, are you afraid not to get signed, like that the document signed? Or are you afraid of having the hard conversation later with the cousin?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I think it's maintaining your professional status, right? And there is a system of how I operate and how we do things, and it's to protect all of us. And, I want to stick to that, right? I want to stick to that process.
Because last week I didn't care. Because a cousin could text. I'd be like, yeah, man, I'll meet you at the property. Yeah. Like, I know they're good for the pre-approval. Like, I don't have to jump through the hoops of calling their lender and doing all that.
Yeah.
And I know I'm getting paid. I don't have to talk about commissions, right? They don't know my commissions, essentially.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they see it online, but they don't know what that means.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting my $20,000 check without having to say something. And I'm probably able to give them like a little not a kickback, but a credit towards their closing costs.
Yeah, and you could still do that.
Yeah, you can still do that, but it's a conversation now.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the thing that trips a bunch of buyer agents up.
Yeah. And I think that before in those scenarios, it was almost too easy, which created potential problems right along the way. And so I think that if you can streamline the process and make sure that people are on the same page, have the same understanding, then not only could it actually streamline things, but it keeps everybody on the same page. Yeah. And so there's no like surprises like, oh, like I didn't know you're making X amount of dollars. Well, yeah, we talked about that when we met and went over the document that you signed. And I apologize that wasn't clear. And yet that is what we went over. Like that's why we met in the first place. So you can always go back to that. Can you always give concessions from your commissions? Yeah. So, I would say if it's a family or your friend, you can have that conversation up front. Hey, this is the standard, and this is the standard that I operate on and the rest of my team operates on. So we don't deviate from that. And yet, because obviously we're family, there are some things we can do once we get into escrow to figure out if we can, modify the commissions, or if we can give you credit back so that it covers some of your closing costs or something like that.
All right. So that was basically part one, the initial phone call to the conversation of getting them into the office, into the buyer's consultation. So to summarize everything, you're not having that conversation up front. You're kind of gathering, like a information gathering phone call on the initial call. You're going through the checklist of what you need for the bare minimum to get them into the office or meet face-to-face somewhere, or you go to their house or whatever the case may be, or a Zoom call, but you prefer going face-to-face.
Yeah, and I prefer my office for a buyer's consultation, mainly because chances are if they're like a friend or referral or a family member, they've never even been to the office, and when they come here, they're like, oh, Mike's actually pretty legit, right? He has an office, he has awards on, he has books, like, I didn't realize Mike was this guy.
So what does
and sometimes
EXP
that's
do?
the problem with a lot of agents is that they don't have that level of credibility, and they're just banking on the relationship with your cousin.
That's it.
And yet you want to elevate that experience for your client. And again, I'm not here bragging to all my relatives like, hey, I'm the best agent in town. Sometimes coming to the office, they realize like their professionalism and that there is more to that than what they thought. And you have to create that.
Yeah, before we jump into part two, you reminded me of like these big brands like EXP. They don't have offices. Like some of them don't, right? I would say 90% are virtual.
Yeah, I would say most of the bigger teams and bigger agents, they actually do have offices and they pay out of pocket for those offices.
But we're not really talking to those bigger agents. I think those bigger agents are going to be fine. They're going to implement their systems like you have, and they're going to drill it down to their agents, and they're going to follow instructions. It's the rest of the 90% who don't have a strong brand, who don't have an office, who don't have the legal backing of some of these bigger companies. So does that, as an agent, and we're sidetracking, but as an agent, do you now pivot to different brokerages? Do you pivot to teams who understand what's happening and have the backing and have the systems in place? Or do you go with like the big block down the street? They don't have offices. They have a couple offices, right? But you're a free agent. You're out there on your own. You're just using their white label big block or EXP.
Yeah.
So
I think it depends on what your goal is as an agent, right? Is your goal to just serve your friends and family, do one or two deals here or there, and not take it seriously, not be a professional, and not build a business around real estate? If that's the goal, then maybe you don't need an office, and maybe you don't need to go through all of the things that I'm sharing that you should go through. But if you want to be somebody like me who wants to build a sustainable business around real estate, then there are business practices that I think a lot of agents have overlooked in the past. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I learned early on that separated me from a lot of other people, right? If you look at the track record, and I just got featured in a cool magazine, and my track record, when I got kind of started back into real estate as an agent, because I ran a team prior to that, from 2020 to now, I did 235 transactions. But what people didn't see was I had a business background before that. So when I got into the business, I actually treated it like a business, not treated it like, oh, I hope I get my cousin to buy a house and make 15 grand, right? So I had tools, I had systems, I had things put in place so that I can operate like a business owner does. Yeah. And I treat it the same way as an attorney would treat their business, or a doctor would treat their business. Have you ever been a doctor that doesn't have an office? Or would you?
I have actually once. The illegal drug. No.
I mean, there are the virtual ones,
Zoom,
right?
Yeah,
and
that's
that's
a Zoom
cool.
call, but it wasn't as you want to go into it. I mean, you want to feel like you got the machinery and the MRI machines and all that.
Exactly, right? When you walk into a doctor's office, they have an award, or they have an assistant, they have a secretary. Like, you feel like, okay.
I would argue that we're not like on that level, but some people make more money than doctors.
I mean, I make more than my doctor friends.
Yeah,
so
that's true. Yeah.
It depends how you want to treat it, right? And so that's why I would say the brokerages or the office space and stuff is dependent on what the objectives are.
But when it comes down to this NAR lawsuit, you need to have that. I think that's why we're having this conversation. I think if you don't have these conversations, you're gonna have a lot more fallout than you would, because like I said, I had a call the other day. The guy was a referral. I closed a house for him 4 years ago. I did the loan for him. I did a refi. So that's 4 or 5 transactions. He referred me family and friends. He said, hey, I want to list my house. Perfect. I got him a pre-approval for his next house. We didn't sign a listing agreement or anything because I was going over there next week. I referred him an agent in Houston. The Houston agent signed a commission agreement with him. And then that kind of triggered him to be like, hey, Josh, what's your commission? And what do you entail? And this and that. I called someone else, and he's only charging me 1%.
Yeah.
And I'm like, look, bro, like, I don't even know why you called the other guy. I thought we were cool, but I didn't go through the steps.
Yeah.
And I think that with this whole buyer thing, you have to go through these steps or you're going to lose buyers right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's going to be I've seen the ads already. Why pay 3% to your buyer's agent? I'll do it for 1%.
Yeah.
We've seen those on listing. It's going to be a buyer's thing
For
now,
sure.
where
Yeah.
I could be a discount buyer's agent if I really wanted to, and just get the volume of 1%. Hey, you're guaranteed to pay 1% or less. Right?
Yeah. And that's your business model, right? And that's not my business model. And so it's important to understand what your business model is, what your value proposition is, and create that value proposition and experience for your client. And so for me, if I'm charging 2.5% or 3% to a client, I want them to come to my office because in the back of their mind, they're thinking, oh, like Mike's not only legit and professional, he also has business expenses. So no wonder he's charging a fee, right? It justifies charging a fee because there are expenses to doing business. And if you want it done right and done by a professional, well, there's a cost associated to that, right? And so, if you're my cousin, you're like, or my friend or my whoever past client, and they're like, oh, somebody down the street will do it for 1% on the buyer side, I'd be like, dang, like, are you sure you want to go with that guy? He's already discounting his commission. You haven't even met with him yet. What do you think he's going to do when it comes to buying your house? You think he's going to fight for you every step of the way, try to get you the best deal? Like, probably not. He's not even fighting for his own commission. He's not even sharing any value of what he's going to bring to the table. And he's already discounting himself. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't go to the 99-cent store to buy all of my groceries and all my food. I go to Trader Joe's, or I try to be healthy and try to make good decisions, right? And do you want to make a good decision, or do you want to just go with the what seems like the cheapest person out there? It might come back to bite you.
Yeah. So that's part one. Let's go to part two real quick. All right, so part two was to summarize everything. We're talking about the NAR settlement and how buyer's agents need to do more to retain more of their income or to be more attractive in terms of the other person has to pay you a commission now, the buyer does. So you have to show some sort of value and some sort of professionalism, in my opinion. And that's why we're having this conversation with Mike. So if you watch part one, we're now at the buyer's consultation. So Mike has scheduled a face-to-face conversation with me in his office. So Mike, I'm just walked into your office. Shake hands, kiss
nice
babies.
to meet you, Josh. I appreciate
Mike,
you coming down
thanks
here.
for having me.
Man, it's super exciting that you're looking to buy a house.
Yeah. It is.
Awesome. Well, we're going to sit down and we're going to go through a bunch of things today. It'll probably take somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes, depending on how many questions you have or anything like that.
Okay.
But the first thing that I want to start with is really just understanding what you're looking for in a house, right? And so before we do that, I want to get some personal information down. That way, when it comes to writing the offer, we already have everything dialed in our system and ready to go. So there's no hiccups along the way. So you'll notice I'm very proactive when it comes to this because I treat your home buying process very seriously, because chances are this is the biggest decision you're going to make. And so I want you to know that I'm dialed in to make sure that I'm with you every step of the way. Is that cool?
Yeah, that's cool. Pause. Not you, cameraman. Pause the conversation. So do you have like a checklist or how?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have basically a buyer's questionnaire that I'm going to start with. So my step one is to have a brief conversation and then go through the questionnaire. So the questionnaire starts with their name, like first and last name, because sometimes in our world, right, our buddy or our cousin, we might not even know their real name. Like, Johnny's not your real name, like it's Jonathan. Oh, like you're gonna need those legal names when it comes to writing the offer. So I want to be prepped ahead of time.
Okay.
So names, email, phone number, any other buyers that might be buying, spouse or significant other or things like that. And then I'll try to get birthdays or dog names or kids names. And that way I have a lot of understanding of.
And you're doing this organically, right?
Yeah, of course.
Because you don't need dog's name for the offer.
Not necessarily.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, do you have any pets type thing? Oh, cool. You have a dog. What are the names? And then you write that stuff down. Okay. So we're back into role play mode. And you don't have to go back to pause. You don't have to go every question, but you can just ask me the last question basically.
Yeah. So section one is kind of like personal information. Right.
And so then my name's Josh. My birthday's this, and this. Perfect. I have one dog. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
perfect. And then if any objections are there, like, oh, why do you need my birthday? Then I'll be like, well, Josh, don't you want me to send you a birthday gift on your birthday? Like,
Yeah.
what's your birthday?
Yeah,
So
that's an easy one.
you usually don't get pushback on that
Yeah.
stuff. And then section 2 is really understanding, okay, what are they looking for in a house? And so trying to dial in as much as possible so that it actually saves both of us time and energy when it comes to looking at houses in person. And so this is a way for me to not only filter what we look at later, but also set the expectations.
Okay.
And so I'm going to ask you things like, okay, Josh, sounds like you mentioned earlier you're looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. Is that still what you're looking for?
Yeah, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. I need an office now. I mean,
Okay.
I work from home, so if we can get like a den or
Okay.
something, I don't know if they have those anymore, but
Yeah.
maybe, or even a 4th bedroom, so
Okay.
we can convert that. Yeah,
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. And so I'll ask questions to create some filters. So I'll ask things like, okay, well, sounds like you probably need either 3 with a bonus room or 4 bedrooms. So Josh, if we found the perfect house and we're going to design the perfect house for you right now, if we find the perfect house and it only has 2 bedrooms, can we just agree that we're just not even going to see that house?
Yeah, nope.
Okay, cool.
Cancel.
So I'm already setting those expectations, right? And then I'm going to ask more about the actual house, like what neighborhoods, where do we need to be at? How far is this from work? Are you familiar with things like HOA or Melrose? And I'm going to try to go over those things if they're not familiar. That way, when it comes down to it later, again, I'm saving that time and energy or the surprise of, I didn't know there's HOA of $300 a month.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we talked about that, and that's why, we're not looking at those neighborhoods, right? Or we're looking at those neighborhoods if that's what you wanted.
No, that's awesome.
So
And that's
we're
all
gonna
on
narrow
your
it down.
sheet, right?
Yeah.
So you can, it's like your guide basically of
It's
what's
basically a
asked.
guide, and
Yeah.
I'm going to take some notes along the way, and that way it goes into the CRM later, and so I know exactly what they're looking for, right? When you're working with a lot of clients at the same time, it's, if you're doing 1 or 2, fine, you can remember them. But if you have 10 or 15 clients that are all in a pipeline, you're not going to remember all these little details. And so you want to use your cheat sheets to be able to kind of regroup that call and, open that CRM when you're having that conversation and, make sure that you can revalidate what they're looking for.
And nothing about commission so far, nothing about
No.
NAR settlement, nothing. You're just
Yeah.
having a good old real estate conversation.
Good old conversation. My
Yeah.
goal is to build rapport and build trust through the presentation and through the questionnaire so that by the time it comes up at the end to sign a buyer's agreement and move things forward, they already like me, trust me. We've already gone through some personal information, right? And in the back of their mind, they're like, I don't want to go through this again with somebody else. And I already know Mike. He's a great agent. Man, he educated me on a lot of stuff. Obviously, it makes sense like that. That's the standard next step, right? I want to create that next step for them.
Why not rip off the Band-Aid? Why not just say, hey, here's page 1. You go through your questionnaire, but in the questionnaire, it's like, hey, did you hear about the lawsuit? Like, I don't know. Why not rip it off?
I would say for me, it's because I haven't earned it yet, right? I don't even honestly know if we're working together quite yet, right? And so I want to build some value and add some value to that person so that I have a right to ask for the business.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a good point because I assume that I'm working with everyone, and that might not be the case moving forward. So I might
do
not
assume
want
I'm working with everyone as well.
Yeah.
And yet I also want to make sure that I deliver on my part.
Yeah. Because now there's options or there's rebuttals that will pop up to why not work with you if we don't mesh personality wise, and then you throw a $30,000 commission on me, then I can. That's an easy answer. Like, thanks for your time, type thing. So I guess it makes sense. All right, so you go through your checklist.
Yep. And then towards
what?
the end, there's a couple things. So one, in the questionnaire section, I'm going to attempt to narrow down to their top 5. So by this point, we've already gone over, okay, well, how many bedrooms, bathrooms, neighborhood, maybe layout, kitchen, like what's important about the house, whatever. And at this point, I want to narrow down to their top 4 or 5. And so I'm going to ask Josh, now that we've gone through all of these different things about a house, can you share with me your top 4 or 5 things that are most important about the house? And sometimes they're like, well, I don't really know what that means. So give me an opportunity to explain. And so I'll share with them, okay, well, you mentioned that the primary bedroom has to have dual sinks in the bathroom. That was a very particular thing you mentioned. And so is that a deal breaker if we found the perfect house and it doesn't have 2 sinks? If the answer is yes, then maybe that's one of your top 5, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned a garage, you mentioned backyard for the dogs or whatever, right? So I want to narrow down those top 5 and then I'll ask permission. So Josh, if we find the perfect house, but it only meets 3 out of your top 5, do I have your permission not even to show it to you, not even to give you the address, not even to talk about that house?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. And so, Josh, our goal is to find as close to the perfect house as possible within your budget. And so I'm going to focus on your top 4 and 5 and make sure that every house that we look at, before we spend a lot of time and energy going to that house, that it meets at least 4 of those qualities. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
that's
awesome.
fair. Yeah.
So this saves the agent and the buyer a lot of time and energy from running around looking at a bunch of different houses that we both know ultimately it's not the best fit.
And I know a lot of people say this, but time is money. And so if you're going to be charging a commission and you're just running around showing buyers homes that they don't even want, they don't even qualify for, like you're wasting their time and money at that point, as well as yours, which I don't know why people would do that before, but they would waste a lot of time. Maybe because it was already a given that they were getting X amount of dollars, and like you knew that buyer was walking through the door with you and all that stuff. But now I think you have to be more strategic. You don't want to, if you're going to charge someone $30,000, you can't take them to a house that's just doesn't
even meet any of their needs. Wrong neighborhood, wrong side of town. Like,
I don't even know what
like,
the
dude, what are we doing
here?
Like,
going to the doctor's office for a hurt knee, and the guy like checks your cavities type thing. It's like, what are you doing here, doc? Like, let's get going. All right. So fast forward.
And then the last part of the initial part of the consultation is I'm going to ask them a couple questions of how do I win with them, right? So I'm going to ask Josh, okay, well, there's a lot of different ways that agent can win with you. What's the most important things of what I would need to do to serve you best and win with you? And those could be a variety of things, right? It could be good communication, right? It could be being honest. It could be giving me everything straight up, or it could be making sure that all the parties are included in the conversations, or like all the details are broken down before we write the offer. Like whatever that is, those things are important to that person. And so once I understand those things, I'm going to over deliver on those expectations, right? So we're setting expectations both ways, right? I'm setting expectations of what I expect from them, how I expect them to communicate with me in submitting offers or showing houses or things like that. But I also understand their expectations of what they need from me to create a good experience for them. So I'm going to over deliver. And so if I don't understand those things, it's going to be hard to over deliver because I might over communicate with them and they're like, that's not even important. We just want to buy the house. Right? So it's important to understand kind of where the buyer's coming from.
Yeah, I've failed at that like just recently. Like you have buyers and they have different personalities, different expectations, different cadences, right? Some people like text, some people like emails, some people like phone calls, some people like multiple phone calls. Some people want to be in the loop where every single step of the way. Oh, did you submit the offer? What did the agent say? How do you communicate everything that's happening? Requests for repairs, like, do they know that it's not guaranteed? What did the agent say? How do they respond? How many offers? Like, there's so many things. Yeah. So you got to do a better job of that, especially if you're actually demanding. You're signing an agreement right now, so you have to figure out how they want to be communicated to, which I think is huge and a misstep by me and a lot of agents out there.
Yeah, for sure. So after the questionnaire part, then it goes into like the meat and potatoes of the actual presentation. So I use like a PowerPoint presentation, go slide by slide. And the initial part of that is to establish some understanding, again, kind of reinforce what we already talked about the ideal property, share some information on how they've been searching for properties and versus what we were going to do together, searching properties online, how we're going to view those, how we're going to filter those, how we're going to see those in person. So I'm going to set those expectations along the way so that I know everything about what's important in that experience.
Yeah.
And then the most important slide that I'm going to spend probably 10 to 15 minutes on is the home buying process, right? From start to finish. So step 1 is hiring me as the agent. Josh, we've already established that. And so we're going to go on to step 2. Have you already talked to a lender partner or a mortgage loan officer? And if the answer is yes, then awesome. Now's the best time for me to get that person's contact information. And that way I can reach out to them, introduce myself, let them know that we're working together. And so in the back of their mind, they already think we're working together, right? So I'm having that language and sharing that conversation because at the end, I'm going to ask for the business. And so, well, we're already working together. So what's your lender's information, right? How much have you been approved for and things like that?
Is this a good chance for lenders to be part of this process in terms of value add, right? Like you could easily, if I'm working with another lender as a client, wouldn't you be able to pivot and say, look, I know you're working with someone, but part of working with me is having access to exclusive lenders who are mortgage brokers or whatever they are, or direct. Like, do you use that as part of your pitch, like your other lenders? And how do lenders kind of step into this whole thing?
So usually what I would do in the very first conversation before the appointment, I would have asked them if they were already pre-approved with the lender. And if they told me that they were, I would ask them, are you open to a second opinion? And if the answer was yes, oh, awesome. Well, usually when we do our buyer's consultation, my lender is actually there as well. But he usually steps in kind of on the back end to just, again, educate you on the financial side of things, answer any questions you might have, and maybe even give you some scenarios so that you have a clear understanding of, if we found the perfect house tomorrow, what would you be needing to be able to buy that house and what will your payments look like? Perfect. And so is that okay if so-and-so comes to the back end of our presentation? Perfect. And so I will collaborate with a lender, only especially the ones that I have a strong relationship with, because there are expectations that I have of the lender as well, because it's both of our jobs now to serve that client at the highest level. And
we're going to talk later about like your value proposition, and I think having a strong lender is a strong indication of if you're a good agent or not, because if you have a shitty agent or a shitty loan officer, your deals aren't going through. You have a bad reputation.
It'll make you look bad. Perform bad.
So back to the call or back to the face-to-face. You've gone through the meat and the potatoes, agent, lender. What's after that?
So agent, lender, and then we're going to talk about showing houses, right? And then once you find the perfect house, we're going to write an offer. And one of the unique things that I do differently than majority of agents is I actually have already established a relationship with the listing agent before we submit the offer. Well, what does that mean to you? So usually for me and for us, when we're actually going to go see the property in person, I will actually reach out to the to the agent and let them know that we're already going to see the property. So even if you schedule on showing time, I'll still reach out directly to the agent to establish a point of contact. I'll let them know my buyer's already prepped. They're already educated. We've already narrowed down, and I believe that this could be the perfect property for them. And so I'm excited to show it to them. I wanted to introduce myself, make sure you and I knew each other already. When we're at the property, then we can establish that a little bit further. And then after the fact, if we're going to submit an offer, then it makes it easier because the agent has already talked to me once or twice.
And so still no commission talk.
Still no commission talk.
Okay, when's that coming?
At the end.
I'm waiting. I'm waiting for that.
So in between, right, I would say before I do the buyer's process, there are some things in between to establish credibility. So I'll share a little bit of our track record. I'll share an experience or a story of one of our past clients that are maybe similar to that client, right? A military client or a family or a single person, right? Whatever the case is, I'll pick a story from our past and include that. In the presentation, I do have a video of an experience of a client. And so I'm already going to plant that seed, man, I'm excited for you to experience it just like so-and-so did in this video.
And so long story short, you're going through A to Z before you get to commission, and you're eliminating a lot of the potential comments from a potential buyer who's going to say, well, I don't know if it's worth it or this and that. You're basically showing your value in this
throughout the presentation,
but it sounds like a 30-minute minimum. Like we've been talking for 15. And we're not even going through the and there's not another party here and so on and so on.
So it could go an hour, I would say. It's usually 30 to 45 minutes. Because I don't spend too much time on highlighting me, right? So I kind of glaze over like, oh, this is just a slide about my background, but you already know I've done about 180 million in real estate, and so we can move on to I'll subtly plant some of those things if they didn't know that.
But for the most part, you're just giving them so much value up front that, frankly, when they're done with the presentation, it's an obvious answer. It sounds like to just sign the agreement, but these guys are first-time home buyers, right? Or they've never bought a home in this new environment. So they have no idea what to expect out there. And so maybe they're thinking, I don't want to deal with this with another agent. Like, I don't want to sit with another agent for another hour. That's one of the things I'd learned with cold calling and like cold calling leads. We would buy leads from like Zillow or whatever, and the goal is to keep them on the phone as long as possible, especially in mortgages, right? Because you're getting all the information and personal information and social security and date of birth and tax returns. Our goal was to get all that stuff and keep them on the phone for at least an hour.
Wow.
Why? Because we knew they weren't going to want to do this again. They don't want the next lender who calls to do the same exact pitch and another hour and run
Yeah.
their credit and all that stuff. Your job when I ran that call center was to keep them on the phone, run credit, get all their personal information. If you did that, there was 0% fallout because they're just not doing it. So it sounds like it's similar here, where you're going through this 1 hour red carpet display of what you do to where they're like, man, I don't even want to call another agent because this is so good. And it's too time consuming. Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So you're earning it along the way, right? Yeah. And so you're just building in value over the conversation, over the presentation.
As opposed to like a guy like me who was like, hey, you're on the phone now.
Yeah.
30 seconds. So let's say it's a 5-minute conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, I could have that conversation with 10 agents, right? And then during the course of those 10 agents, back to the mortgages at the call center, what do you think would happen if we didn't get that information?
Yeah.
The other guy would just undercut us. Like,
for sure.
We would talk about the rates. Okay, here.
Yeah.
Oh, Jimmy said at Bank of America that he's going to charge me half. Well, now Jimmy's competing against another guy who's going to charge him a quarter. So when it comes to the real estate side of it, the analogy is, hey, show them so much value up front that they don't want to go anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
And even if they do, they're nervous about what's going to happen.
And a couple things could happen. Maybe they've gone somewhere else. Maybe they met you before, and then they come to me and they're like, Mike, this is like a way different experience than I've had before. I'm grateful that we went through this because we just started looking at houses with the other guy, and he was all over the place. Yeah. That happens. And the opposite could happen too. Let's say for whatever reason they don't want to move forward on the spot with me there, and they want to go interview somebody else. You think they're going to be better than me? Like dialed in, so professional, going through every step, making sure that my client understands everything before they make the biggest decision of their life. The other agent, they're not going to go into that much depth. Maybe you guys, I hope you guys do, because that's the goal, right? To be a professional. And yet they're going to go to somebody else if that's the case, find the 1% guy. He's going to say, oh, yeah, I'll just open the doors for you. Okay, well, they're already having a less valuable experience. And so they're going to come back, right? So this is your opportunity to shine and create the client.
Yeah. Where did we leave off? We left off at...
Yeah, so I'm going to walk them through a couple of those stages, right? Showing houses and then coming down to writing in the offer. And then I'm going to say something like, well, once we get your offer accepted, meaning that's planting a seed in their mind, like you and I, we're going to do it, whatever it takes to get your offer accepted. Yeah. So once we get your offer accepted, then there are a couple other things that happen in escrow. Well, what is escrow? I'm going to explain what escrow is, and then I'm going to explain an EMD, and then I'm going to explain the contingencies, the loan, the appraisal, the inspection, and going to the inspection, what takes place there. Let them know I'm going to be there on that inspection day, and we're going to go over everything, make sure this is the perfect property for them, and uncover any issues or challenges. I'm going to negotiate those things on their behalf. We're going to walk through any potential scenarios on the spot there too. And so I'm going to let them know a couple examples, right? So let's say we come across something that affected the functionality or safety of the house. We're going to potentially ask for those things to be either repaired or ask for credit around that. Well, what could happen from that is the seller could decide to give us a credit. They could decide to give us the repairs if you would agree to that, or they could say no. And so I want to let you know that those are the three outcomes. And so I'm planting that seed now because let's say we come to inspection day and they're like, Mike, you never told me we wouldn't get all the repairs done. You're out, right? Yeah. Like you're going to get fired for that, or you're going to have a less valuable experience for your client. Yeah. And so I want to do that stuff up front.
Okay, cool.
And then I'm going to tell them next steps is we're going to do our final walkthrough, and then you're going to get the keys and we're going to celebrate. And so how would you like to celebrate? Do you want to do photos, videos, or champagne, or should we do a taco truck for you guys so that we can have all your friends and family come celebrate the new house?
And you do all that for all your buyers.
Yeah.
I would go with all of the above. So
maybe it's all of the above.
Yeah,
right.
I want all of it for $30,000. Better, bro.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then now, like, right, we haven't even talked commissions yet, but you've built a lot of value. You've shared with them by this point all of the steps. You're going to be there. You're going to take time out of your day, time away from your family to show them houses, to go to the inspections, to write offers. And part of that, we're going to share some stories in between of clients that have bought a house really quickly and then clients that have taken a long time. And so I want them to understand I'm with you every step of the way, and we could, find the right house the first time around. It's actually happened to me, I think now 3 times. We showed one house and they bought that house. Cool. And there's been other times to where my longest client right now, like in my career, it's taken about 12 months to find the perfect house and get them into that house. It was during COVID, a lot of rules, there's a lot of things going on. And so there was a lot of pauses in between as well. And so it could take 12 months, and whatever it takes, the commission's going to be the same, and everything's the same, and I'm with you every step of the way until we find your dream house. And so you want to plant those things, because in the back of their mind, again, when it comes down to the agreements, down to the commissions, they understand that, man, there's a lot that goes into this house. Yeah. Mike just explained so many things that happen, and he's going to be with us every step of the way. Like, man, I'm so glad that he's only doing it for $30,000.
Yeah. That's
the goal. What, right? You want to create
picture perfect goal. Now let's talk rebuttals, right? you finally got to that, and you say, well, this is how it works. I go, okay, well, that sounds like a lot. Like, are you flexible in your commissions, or is there a possibility of maybe the seller paying for it? Like, how do you break that down for like a rebuttal?
So, standard commissions are 2.5%. I think in this new world, and I'm not 100% sure yet, I just signed one today for a buyer that at 2.5%. And yet my team and we've been talking, and I may increase my own to 3%, because my time is valuable. I do have a unique skill. We have been able to help a lot of clients, get discounts on their house or buy something, strategically. And so there is value in that. And so I want to create that experience for the client, but I also can't do that for free or for the normal cost of every other agent, right? And so so there may be a premium to work with me, and I could do that now. I couldn't do that before. So every client, right, it was the same standard commission, right? And so now I can
actually charge more. Why not charge 4%?
And that could be possible, right?
Maybe for the smaller end, but high end stuff, maybe you charge less. Is that like if some guy wants to see a $20 million home?
It's possible, right?
You're not going to say, give me 3%,
yeah.
Are you? Like, you might.
Yeah.
Depends on the relationship.
It depends. I would say. But I would say whoever's watching this, set a standard for yourself. Like, my low standard is going to be 2.5%. More than likely, my sweet spot and my offering will be at 3%, and I might have two packages, kind of how I have for listings, right? They have multiple packages based on what they want, but also showing them like how we're going to market the property. Hey, if you don't want the 3D tour and you don't need the cleaning services that are included in our full service package, I'm okay with that. It's going to be X amount of percentage instead.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Just cost.
So same thing with the buyers, right? If you don't want the full experience and you don't want the hand holding all the way through, you don't want the closing photos, the videos, the client appreciation events that come after closing a house, the taco truck, at your housewarming party. If you don't want all of those things and you just want to close a deal and say bye, Mike. Oh, cool. That one's at 2.5%. We can definitely do that. But if you want the full experience, like all of my clients do and love and are grateful for, then my suggestion is the 3% package, because that's the standard, right?
And then if they say no, the guy down the street, I don't know what Redfin's doing personally. I haven't looked yet, but Redfin was charging 1% before, right? And then they would give you a percent. I don't know what they were doing, but they're still going to be doing something. So as your client, you're not client yet, but potential client, I'm going to say, look, the guy down the street, Redfin's offering me 1%. Why not just go with them, Mike?
Yeah, that's awesome. Have you already met with Mr. Redfin?
I called him on the phone. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And what was his process like to help you purchase the biggest purchase of your life?
To be honest with you, it was just a quick phone call. It was probably like 20 minutes long, 10 minutes long, but I think he sent me a couple of emails that I had to go through. Yeah,
gotcha. And so he was already ready to help you buy a house?
It seemed like it. I didn't. Yeah, that's what I got from the vibe of it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so can you already see how me and Mr. Redfin are completely different?
Yeah.
Right? I think anybody can open a door at this point. And, if real estate agents weren't important and they weren't fighting for their clients, then they would just make it automatic. Nowadays, you can put a keypad on a door, send a person, and they can go in the house. And so there is value in the relationship that we have, right, Josh? But there's also value in the amount of value and experience that I provide to my clients. And so, you know what, I can't, make any promises or anything like that, but I can promise you that we're going to do the best that we can to serve you and get you to the finish line. I don't know if Mr. Redfin can do that. And obviously their process is already not as dialed in as mine. And so if you're looking for a premium experience and you want to get into the perfect house and you want to do it as smoothly and easily as possible with somebody you already like and trust, then I think I'm the best fit. And yet, if you want the discounted route, you're more than happy to go explore that route. And I can definitely already tell that the difference is going to be very obvious for you.
Yeah, okay. And then the next rebuttal would be, can we just try this out? Like, how long is this contract good for? Is this thing negotiable in escrow? Like, what if we get into a house, Mike, and this is going to be a real conversation, right? You put an offer in on the house, and it's my dream house, picture perfect house, and the seller says, no, I'm not paying for the buyer's commission. And I don't have enough money to pay you, basically, when it comes down to it. Everything's maxed out. Is it negotiable? Like, once we get into escrow, Mike, like, how are you going to handle that? One, and two, what do you say in that situation?
Yeah, so a couple things. So one is the commission's not negotiable, right? We have the 2 packages, and you're more than welcome to choose one or the other.
Yeah, he's cold, bro. He's cold.
And,
it's my dream house. I said it was my dream house.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, if it does come down to it and we have to cross that bridge when we get there, then we will. And yet I want to make sure that we have the right expectations, right? That I'm going to do whatever it takes on my end to make sure that you find that dream house, you get into that house, and you're able to close and purchase that home.
Yeah.
And if I'm the one that's in the way, Josh, you already know me. Like, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that we don't miss out on that opportunity. And so if it does come down to that, we'll have that conversation. And yet what I found is that I've never had to have that out of 235 transactions, almost $200 million worth of real estate. It hasn't happened to me once. And so I always find a way to make it work for all parties.
Yeah. So you're not negotiating at all until it's like gun to your head, deal's going to cancel unless you credit them $10,000 or whatever the case may be.
And does that happen? It could happen.
Yeah, it used to happen before.
Yeah, you just got to exhaust all the other options, right? Like, okay, well, what else could we do in those scenarios?
It would happen before, but you would have that pivot in the back of your pocket, right? Because they didn't, like, you could just, I had a request for repairs issue where the buyer and the seller are arguing about $1,000. Like, dude, just take it for my commission. Here you go, $1,000. Now that's out in the open, right? You're making $30,000. Like, Mike, dude, it's $5,000. Can you help me out? Like, I can't do all of it. Like, seller's not budging. I can't pay for it. Like, can you take $25,000, Mike? Like, at the end of the day, you have to pick something because they can cancel, right?
That typically happens in escrow when you're kind of already into it, right? In those scenarios, though, it's my job to negotiate, right? That's what we're trained to do, and that's why you hire a good agent that can do that, because rarely do I just give up commissions, right? Because there are a lot of other scenarios that you could potentially help make happen.
Bro, I'm giving up commissions left and right. $1,000. I'm like, here, man, here's the check. Let's move on. You want everyone good? Let's call it a day.
Yeah. And I think I focus on adding so much value to my client, and believe it, this has happened before. Like, I had a client, let's see, maybe like 4 or 5 months ago. They bought a new construction house. And we had looked at other houses, and they knew the full commission, at that time was 2 to 2.5%. And we had looked at other houses, and they fell in love with this new construction house. And it was a flat fee commission, $5,000. And my client's like, Mike, can we still buy this house? Like, how are you going to make the rest of your money? Nothing more I could do.
Well, you could charge them. Why
that's
didn't
what
you
they're
charge
offering.
them?
And that could have been the route, right? And that wasn't on the radar at that time. And so that does happen where you create a lot of value that your clients feel bad driving around doing all of this work, fighting, for the deal, and then you got to take a hit.
Yeah, that happened to me last week, but my client didn't care about my commission. Or they signed up with a new build, and I called the new build, like, we're not giving out a commission, not even a flat fee or anything. And my client was like, dude, I like the house. Like, what do you want me to do? So now, I mean, that brings up a whole new
there's a whole
new pivot right there. Now you could still get your commission when you go to a new build.
You can.
So when we thought that should have been that, I mean, why didn't we think of that before? That should have been standard practice. Like, hey, if you're gonna go look at a new build, this is my commission, because we are gonna go look at all these other houses. And most of the time, like myself last week, you're just shit out of luck. Where now you get that agreement signed at your buyer's consultation, you're getting your commission. It might not be 2.5 or whatever, but you negotiate as you go. And it sounds like it's gonna be a whole different ball game now with new builds and new construction and so on and so on.
And that's exciting. And that's the thing I think people forget is new builds. They've been doing this already, right? They got offer 0 to a buyer's agent, and most of their deals come from buyer's agents, right? Like, I mean, I see some ads or some marketing around new builds, but usually the new builds in our area, they're like in the outskirts somewhere. Nobody's driving by and seeing those, and so for us, the agent usually procured that buyer and brought the buyer.
And like, I think it depends on markets, right? In the tough market, I think negotiating commission is going to be tough for anyone in a cutthroat environment where the last 2 years where it's like, dude, it's going to be a whole different ballgame. But when it slows down and inventory's up and sellers are more susceptible to negotiate and agents are fewer transactions per month or per year, and they see their paychecks not coming in as much, and like we see now, I think people are going to either negotiate more aggressively for survival, right? Like, hey, you have to pay this commission buyer. I'm going to do whatever I can to fight for it with the seller. Maybe they only pay half, but you got to pay the other half. Like that's how it's going to work. And that was one of the other questions I had as a buyer was, okay, the seller says no. Now what?
Yeah. So a couple other options could take place. Is one that it could be paid out through the closing costs of the purchase, or two, we could potentially roll that into the loan and increase the purchase price, and that way you're basically financing
how does that work? So I offer I like the house on 123 Main Street. It's listed at 600. 600. You want 3% commission? I think that's 18,000. So what are we going to offer? 618, and then
So initially, my objective would be to offer the 600,000, because that's what you wanted to buy it for, right? Yeah. And ask for the seller to credit the commissions for my services to bring the buyer. In the event that seller does not agree and I'm unable to negotiate that, which, by the way, I'm trained to do that, and I'm going to do whatever we can to get that compensation from the seller. But in the event that seller is not willing to or not able to do that, then the other options could take place, right? So we can increase that sales price, the offer price to $618, and $18,000 is coming back towards the commissions. Or we could potentially add that to your closing costs, so you don't have a higher purchase price, but you have additional closing costs to cover for the commissions.
Okay.
So which option would be best for you?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. That's a good thing.
We cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, I think you would have, as a buyer's agent, you would need to show that somehow, right? On like a spreadsheet or one of your slides,
example or something
during the consultation. And even when you're submitting these offers, like I think the days of just sending a DocuSign without reviewing it with your buyer are kind of gone, right? Now you have to go through it page by page before they sign it.
Yeah.
I mean, my client would go see a house. They say, oh, I want to put an offer in. I would already have their info. I would say, okay, cool. I'm going to send you a DocuSign. Yeah. And after the first one, they're not asking questions, right?
Yeah.
They're just signing. But now it sounds like you have to really go through.
Yeah, it's important to break it down for them, at least to some extent, right?
Because every property is going to be different.
Yeah.
Every project, every listing is going to say yes or no to your commission. If they say yes, cool. If they say no, you don't want your paycheck to hinder the transaction.
Right. Yeah. I mean, put yourself in the agent's shoes, right? Let's say you show properties for 6 months. You finally find the right house. The seller's ready to go, and they're like, no, I'm not paying any commissions. Like, what do you do as the agent? Right? You're not going to step down at that point. You just did all of this work to serve your client, do the best job that you can. And so you've earned the right to earn commissions somewhere. And so the buyer has to understand that at that point. And I think they would.
If the agents don't paint that picture ahead of time like you do with your consultation, I think they're going to end up taking less money just to get the deal done. I could see myself doing that because it's too stressful to go through. You find the perfect home, the buyer's excited, the seller finally responds and he says no to your commission.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, look, dude, you really like the home, cool. We'll cut the commission in half. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So now it's not only a negotiation with the seller and the seller's agent, it's a negotiation with your bank account and your buyer.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of poor agents, not poor like monetary, but quality wise, will struggle with this shift.
Yeah.
And so I'm worried for them. In a nutshell, I'm not worried for guys like you because it sounds like you have your ducks in a row. And after watching this, I think more people will reach out and ask the questions. If we could share some of the spreadsheets or whatever, I don't think you care. It's more about execution, right? You could copy the greatest people in the world, but if you can't execute their actual delivery and their persona, then it's all for naught.
Yeah.
I have one more rebuttal that I totally forgot. Oh, timing wise, like how long is this contract good for? I haven't looked at the contract. I have with the first version, but I know there's multiple versions.
Yeah, the max is 90 days.
So 90 days, is it specific to a property or is it broad?
So you can choose like a state or not a state, a city or county. You could specify a specific property if you wanted to. So in the event, like your scenarios, right? Like, oh, I want to go see 123 Main Street right now. You could potentially write a buyer's agreement for that one house, and then you're entitled 30 days, right? So meaning that, let's say they don't buy the house today and they come back in like 10 days because you're the one that showed them. You have 30 days, I believe, on that contract.
And then how do you cancel that contract as a buyer?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they could, submit a cancellation or something in writing to cancel it. And so just like anything.
And there's no...
It depends on what you want to do as the agent at that point.
Yeah. So that
And
was one of my other concerns is lawsuits. And we could talk about that in a different video, but it sounds like they can cancel, which is good. It sounds like you can renegotiate. One thing that was a little trickery for me was you fill out the form. Let's just say we agree to a 1% commission, hypothetically. I know most people won't. But we had this situation with an agent on that one deal where the seller said, yeah, we'll pay you a commission. But apparently the commission cannot exceed what you as a buyer's agent already agreed to.
Correct.
So if I said, hey, I'm going to pay you 1%, you can't ask the seller for 2%.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
I don't know why that is a rule, but that is the rule. And so let's say, for example, like the seller was willing to offer 2%, and in your buyer agreement, you only had 1%. Yeah. You're only entitled to 1%. And so,
does that help your, or is that something you would communicate with your buyer? Like, hey, Mr. Buyer, I'm going to do whatever I can to get the seller to pay for this 2.5%. And we can renegotiate when it comes down to it, whatever. But I cannot put anything less than 2.5%.
Yeah.
Because that's going to bite me in the ass.
Yeah.
Because there will be sellers out there who just don't know, right? Some good listing agents will prep them and say, hey, this is what's going to happen. If you want this dollar amount, you're going to have to pay a commission.
Yeah.
But you want to protect your back. You want to have that higher commission amount because this poor girl, she tried to submit a commission thing and they were like, no, you signed a 0.5 point.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was an off-market deal or whatever the case may be. But the guy had an agent. And they're like, no, we're not paying you more. Yeah. You have an agreement for 0.5 point, so we'll pay you your $4,000.
Yeah. I mean, again, imagine you had a seller, right? And they were like, yeah, I want to offer 3% to encourage people to bring their clients over, right? And imagine you only put 2.5%. Oh. And even that, right? Like they're literally offering 3%, even though it's not on like publicly. Yeah. And you're almost shooting yourself in the foot by not having your buyers sign at 3%.
So that's a good tip, right? Yeah. Just get them to sign at 3%. Give them some backdrop about the history of it and how it works and so on and so on. Yeah. And the main goal is to get the seller to pay for it. I'm hoping that sellers will just go along with it, but I'm a seller. I know if a deal comes in, it's a lowball deal. Or it's not what I want, or they're the agent's a dick, or something along those lines. It's an easy, yeah, sure, I'll take your deal, but I won't pay for your commission.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Just to I know there's sellers like that, right?
Yeah.
And I hope that everyone just goes along with the punches, and every seller's like, whatever, we'll pay it, like it's standard. Mm-hmm. But I know that there's going to be instances where sellers are going to say no, thank you, and I know the power of the media. And I think the media kind of blows this thing out of proportion way more than it actually is.
In like 3 months, everything's going to be normal.
Yeah, but for now, CNN's doing it, Fox News, whatever that other real estate company is, Redfin, Zillow, are all, they're just pumping out stories that are negative, right? The world's ending, blah, 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 blah. So I think that influences a lot of sellers who are now asking questions as to, hey, if I don't have to pay commission, why do I have to pay commission?
Yeah.
And if you don't communicate the value, you're screwed as a listing agent.
Oh, yeah.
Too.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And that's a whole different video. I have one more rebuttal, but I forgot it. Damn, it was so good, too. We talked about family. We talked about a lot, which is good. What other final tips before we go?
Yeah. I mean, I would say if you're a real estate agent, have your standards, right? Operate at a high level, operate at a high standard, and explain that and share that value to your clients, and you should be fine.
And I think demand it from your team, your broker, yourself. Basically, go get the training that you need. Yeah. You can't. The days are gone. You can't just show up to a property. Oh, that was one of my questions. Can you just show up to a property without the agreement? Technically, no one's gonna I think I saw a meme where it's a realtor calling NAR hotline because I just saw a buyer and their buyer without an agreement. Who's checking this stuff?
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to enforce this, especially at an open house or scenarios like that.
Or we can talk about that. Open houses are going to be the one place where you don't need the agreement.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, potentially we'll see kind of how they
you don't have to
modify things.
You walk into a house, you have no agent, you're seeing the house without an agent. I think that's the only open houses are going to be the new cool thing now.
Maybe.
Where, where now everyone wants to do open houses.
Yeah, so then you got to execute really high level at the open house,
That's a
right?
different video.
That's your opportunity to get
Yeah,
a bunch
yeah.
of buyer leads and help move people forward.
Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, be better, right? As always, educate yourself on the new law. Reach out to us if you have any questions. We're here to help. We can maneuver through different avenues. I had another top too. I'm thinking about all
There's a lot of stuff.
But like Realtor.com, I used to buy a lot of Realtor.com, and the main goal was to go meet them at the property. First call, like, oh, cool, you inquired at 123 Main Street. Let's go see it right now. Are you available at 2:00?
Yeah.
And they would say, yeah, and we would go and we would close them face to face. But it sounds like I can't even do that anymore. Which, what happens to Realtor.com? What happens to Zillow?
Yeah.
What happens to those companies who are selling these leads? I'm going to short their stock.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're probably going to build in some back end strategy and have a referral or something else instead. That's kind of one of the things that I think could potentially take place. And I don't know if anybody's really mentioned that, but I've been thinking about this too, right? Like Zillow, technically they are a real estate company, and they could have a client when they sign in or opt in to Zillow to be able to, basically be represented by Zillow, and then they're gonna, referral fee that out to the agent that they sell that lead to. So that's a potential. And that way they're already signed. They're already, signed to somebody ready to go.
And then you assign the buyer's agreement. Can you do that? Like,
I mean, you could ask for a referral fee, 20, 30% or whatever that might be.
Does that new agent have to sign a new commission agreement? Like,
I don't know. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of layers to it that I don't think they've thought everything through, because there's a lot of different scenarios.
Yeah, like the Realtor.com thing just blows my mind right now, because we spent a lot of money with them, and there's no way this lead funnel works if you have to sign an agreement before looking at a house. So you really have to do your method of the first phone call has to be full of value to schedule a face-to-face showing. That's crazy. Yeah, something to do another video on. That's it for me. You guys know how to reach me. Mike Blair, you're on Instagram, Facebook, MySpace. What else?
Yeah, MySpace, Mike Blair Realty.
You're probably on there for sure. All right, guys. Peace out.
See you guys. That's good. That's a lot.